Deuteronomy chapter 34, and we're going to start in verse 4. Okay. Deuteronomy chapter 34 and verse 4. And the Lord said to him, This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go there. That's God talking to Moses, as Moses, when he was 120 years old, climbed Mount Nebo and looked over into the promised land, a place he'd never set foot, as he led the people out of Egypt and 40 years in the wilderness. And as this people was about to go over and possess the land that the Lord gave them, this is Moses laying his eyes on it, and shortly before he passes. And Deuteronomy chapter, one thing that I noticed about this in verse 4 is that this is a land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and it says, I will give it to you for your offspring. And oftentimes I think about the promised land. I think about the place that God has prepared for us, and we can think in terms of earthly things, and like the Israelites got this land of milk and honey to possess, and we can think of our promised land, so to speak, like that. And there's a lot of different thoughts you can have about, what the promised land is for you. But it was a place for their offspring, and it's a place for multiplication. That is one thing that God does intend, and we've talked about it a lot lately, is that we multiply. It's not necessarily just about growth. It's not necessarily just about focusing on church growth, but it is multiplying in spirit. It is the thing. Peter said, somebody asked him for some money or something one time. Peter said, Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give to you. It was a guy that needed healing, and he said, get up and walk, and he was healed. Oftentimes we're going to be financially blessed. Oftentimes we're going to be filled with the resources of the world, but that isn't the primary focus. The primary focus is that we be a people that multiply in spirit. And that was what this place was for the people of Israel. It was a place of blessing, that the Lord would have them inhabit with him, that they would multiply in. In Deuteronomy 3 and 34 and verse 7, it says, Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were undimmed and his vigor unabated, and the people of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. Then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses was ended. Moses kept his abode, so to speak, with the Spirit of God. For 40 years, he was in the wilderness with God. And what marked Moses and his goodness was that he was with God. There wasn't anything that Moses ever did that he was accredited for that was outside of God. And in fact, the one time that is mentioned that Moses did a thing once he was in the will of God that was outside what God told him to do, this very moment is the time that he's paying for it. When he struck the rock out of anger, instead of just doing what he was told, said he wouldn't go in and possess the land. Everything that Moses had and did that he was accredited to was given to him by God, and was because the Spirit of God dwelt with him. And the people honored Moses, said they honored him and wept and mourned for him for 30 days. Moses died on the mountain before they crossed over into the promised land, and for 30 days they gave him his due. They buried him in the land of Moab, and then they moved on. Moses was honored in succession. In Deuteronomy 34, starting in verse 9, it says, And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. And so the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And there was not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. None like him in all the signs and the wonders that the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land. And for all the mighty power and all the great deeds of terror that Moses did in the sight of Israel. So Moses is succeeded by Joshua, and we're going to start looking at the process to go over and possess the inheritance of the promised land. Joshua was the honored replacement, honored by Moses. And then in Joshua chapter 1, starting in verse 5, it says that no man, this is God talking to Joshua, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. We're going to be going through verse 9. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all that the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your weapons prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So there's a repetitive command to be strong and courageous. And we have to remember in our lives when we get discouraged and we lack the courage to stand for God and stand for the truth that He has commanded us. He hasn't suggested it. He has commanded us to be strong and courageous in His will. And inside that command to be strong and courageous, there is another command of something that we must carefully do. And in verse 7, I back up and says, only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your weapons prosperous, and then you will have good success. This is not about our salvation. This isn't about keeping the law that we would be saved. What this is about is it keeping in the Spirit of God in our actions. Not just a few of them, but all of them. And there's times that we find out that we're not keeping the Spirit of God. And we have a responsibility to do what God says in His Word when we do those things and find out we've done those things, to turn from them, to ask God for His provision, for His grace, for His help, and to get back following after God. We can't mix it up. We can't get this idea that it's our strength and our flesh and our deeds that save us. It's not what this is about. It is about continuity between the truth and whether we're a part of the truth or not. And if you really get down to it, once you get past all the differentiation between your works and the grace that you have and your faith and where you come about your salvation and who it actually comes from and where your righteousness actually comes from, and that you do have a duty and a responsibility to walk in it, to be holy, because God said, be holy because I'm holy. Once you get past all of that, then you can start to understand and realize that there is a task. There is a absolute predestined task that God has for you. And you can't walk in it, and you can't do it until you're settled on your faith, until you're settled on the grace that God has given you, and you're settled in walking in these truths and walking in His ways and His commands. And we're not going to get into the difference in different portions of the law with the ceremonial, holy portion of the law for the sanctification of the priests and stuff like that. The stuff that Jesus Christ completed for us and fulfilled for us on the cross. This is not about that. This is about in everything that we do. Was talking with the boys yesterday, and it came up. What's the word? Replacements for cuss words, I guess. Like the little soft cuss words. It's like we were talking about it with Emmett, because he said some stuff, and it's just like trying to make him understand that though the words that he's using might not be so serious, the representation of it is your mind is going to that place that's what you're saying. Your mind is going to the place to curse. And the thing is as the word says, to let your yes be yes and your no be no. We should not only in our communication be simple and yes and no, but we also should be in our communication uh, very direct and yes and no. When we get busy putting a little bit too much in there, it's just not good. It's just not necessary. I used to cuss probably, I would imagine, worse than anybody in here, like everybody combined probably. And I don't anymore. And it's just like it's just so unnecessary for me. I used to all the time, and I have very recently I've said things. I'm not trying to act holy or anything, but the thing is, it's just like it's not necessary. Let your yes be yes, your no be no, and be consistent, even all the way down from the big things all the way down to your communication. That's what this is talking about. When you are going to walk in the ways of God, do it in all of His ways. When you say you're going to pray for somebody, and I'm guilty of this, I'll pray for you, brother, and then I don't think about you for 2 weeks. We don't need to do that. We need to be so consistent in our lives that our what comes out of our mouths about how we live is the same. So that when we tell somebody we're going to pray for them, we pray for them, and not only because we told them we're going to pray for them, but because our heart actually desires the thing that they desire, because we care for them. So it says that all your ways will prosper whenever you keep the law, but the law isn't about your salvation. It is about the continuity between the truth and ourselves. And we do have to realize that our responsibility is to repent and to believe. Um, those that perished in the wilderness, the 40 years prior to this point that we're at right now, they did not believe. They saw the obstacles ahead of them. They saw the giants that they were to face, and they disregarded all the works that God had done, and they put stock in their own abilities, and they did not believe. Um, Joshua was one of the spies, one of the 12 that went out. Him and Caleb were the only two that believed. The rest of them did not believe. And now you see where Joshua was at 40 years later, after he was in the wilderness with this people for 40 years. His faithfulness, though it took some time, has come to this point. Joshua chapter 1 and verse 10 says, And Joshua commanded the officers of the people, Pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, Prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan, to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. There is a preparation that takes place. There's a waiting and there's a testing of our faith. There was a testing of Joshua's faith. There are times when God clearly gives us some direction, and maybe it's simple or small. There's times where God has told me I needed to study on a thing. And then for seemingly a good long time, I don't get much more inclination from the Spirit on anything. And it's like, well, did you ever do the thing I told you to do to begin with? And it's like, sometimes that's us. Sometimes we think that this process of our sanctification is just going to be like, I'm just going to knock this thing down. But the thing is we often miss the forest for the trees with our own selves. We often miss the forest for the trees for the things that God has for us, the goodness that God has for us, the holiness that He intends for us to walk in. We see the outward fleshly expressions, but we miss the heart posture that we have in so many of those things. And until we just settle down and are faithful in the things that He has given us today, we're not going to get there. We have to believe in the thing that He said. I mean, if it takes 40 years, we have to believe in the thing that He said. Right? We have to have the faith that His grace is sufficient for us, even when we don't feel it. There's oftentimes you'll hear some people say that I'm saved even when I don't feel like I'm saved. And here's the thing: if you've had a relationship with Jesus Christ long enough, you're going to have times where you don't feel like you're saved, where you don't feel like you're there, and that's when your faith is being tested. Do you believe, or do you not? At some point, the Spirit is going to go over into the promised land. At some point, uh, this wandering around in the wilderness is going to come to an end, and the Spirit is going to go where the Spirit's going to go. And at some point, we're going to have to cross over the Jordan and be with Him, or we're going to have to decide that our understanding of the position that we're in is the more comfortable one, and that we would rather be in the thing that we know. We absolutely can replace our fear with courage, and we can replace our I can't read my own handwriting. We can replace our own discontentment with joy. We can replace our own strife with peace, and we can replace anger with love. We absolutely can replace all these things, but if we just act like we're okay with some of it, it's just not going to happen. Like, we have to cross over. We have to get over there, right? And we have to love our enemies. And I struggle with that. Maggie was telling me this the other day, and I'm like, and I always go back to this thing. It's like, forgive them 70 times 7 if they ask you to forgive them. But there's a portion of our hearts that have to forgive people when they don't ask. There is a reconciliation to forgiveness that comes when repentance is available. But forgiveness of everyone is required of us, because if we do not forgive, He is not going to forgive us. If we do not love those, how can we expect people to come to Christ? Is that not what He did for us? Didn't He love us when you hung Him on the cross? Because it is our sin that put Him there. It is your sin that put Him there. Each and every one of us as individuals. We can't have a way out and think that, no, it was them. It was absolutely us. It was us that He prayed for to forgive them, because they didn't know what they were doing when He hung on the cross. And we can live in that if we choose to trust and believe. And the thing is we have to believe that God can make that work in us. And we have to turn loose of some of the things. And it just doesn't look like the way that we think it looks. The forgiveness thing, it doesn't look the way that we think it looks. There's a picture perfect thing where you forgive somebody and everything is all just wonderful and beautiful and everything is reconciled, and that just might not be the way that it is, right? Judas hung himself in a field, and they didn't find him until his stomach was bloated and burst open and his guts were pouring out before him, to the point that the accounts of Judas's death differ because of the state that he was found in. If you've ever wondered why those are two different seemingly accounts, that's why. Jesus forgave Judas, but Judas didn't have faith in Jesus Christ. His forgiveness was in the person, but not in the spirit of the person, if that makes any sense. And there's so much there that we have to learn about ourselves, that just forgiving isn't necessarily what it looks like to us. But we're not supposed to hold the anger in our heart and the discontentment in our heart for things that we don't have. Maggie and I find ourselves in